All right, it's the day after signing day. We got a lot to cover here. We won't have any basketball coverage on today's Morning Pitt because, look, that game just was too late last night. So we weren't gonna, we weren't gonna be in a position to stay up and tape the Morning Pitt after the game last night. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. We won't have a mailbag edition of the Morning Pitt. We'll get a little hoops talk in tomorrow, and maybe whatever else is going on, we will incorporate that as well because I can't believe tomorrow's already Friday. I can't believe today is already Thursday, but the week flies by when you have something like signing day in the middle of the week, and there's a bunch of stuff we got to recap and wrap up. And we talked a lot about signing day yesterday on the Morning Pit. We talked a lot about it on that live stream we did at 10 a.m. and then that the evening weekly show that Jim and I did. We talked a lot about the recruiting class there. There's a couple things to wrap up that we didn't actually cover. Well, we talked a little bit on the live streams. Didn't talk about it on the Morning Pit, so we'll cover that here. We got some new transfers to talk about, at least as of this taping, some new transfers that we didn't get a chance to talk about yesterday. And then the All-ACC honors that came out and our thoughts on that and where Pitt fit in on the totem pole of the ACC's postseason all-conference team. So lots of stuff to discuss, lots of stuff to get to. We're not going to have an 8-minute intro on today's Morning Pit because we're diving into it right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yes, Thursday. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's the Morning Pit. It's all things Pitt sports and covering a bunch of stuff that sort of went down in the last day or two that we needed to recap and catch up on because we haven't we didn't get a chance to talk about them yesterday. Of course, we talked a lot about signing day on yesterday's Morning Pit. I had to get my legal pads in order. You got to be all ready for your show. We talked about it yesterday on the Morning Pit. Talked a lot about the recruiting class of 19 prospects who were expected to sign with Pitt. By the end of the day, it turned out, by the end of the morning, it turned out they signed 21 recruits. A couple of surprises that popped up on us. Didn't really see them coming. Running back Jalen Brown and wide receiver Cameron Sapp, two guys who they were committed to other schools and ended up flipping to Pitt and announcing their commitments and signings on signing day yesterday. We'll start with Brown. Brown's a running back prospect, and he's a little bit bigger than some of the other running backs in the class. They already have two running backs who we knew were going to sign, Saquon Smith and Ja'Karian Turner. But they're both smaller guys, whereas Brown is more, he told me yesterday, actually, he's 5'11", 193. So a bit of a bigger back. Than what we see. Not necessarily, I mean, he's not 6'2", 220 or something like that. He's not James Conner, but he's a little bit bigger than the other guys in the recruiting class. He's a little bit bigger than Desmond Reed, maybe a little bit bigger than Juelz Goff. So a little bit more size, but also a lot of speed. And look, at the risk of invoking Todd Graham, I mean, this is a recruiting class as a whole defined by speed. And it's certainly the case with the offensive skill players, receivers, and running backs, but also the secondary has a lot of speed in it. And, for linebackers, these guys, Manny Taylor and Justin Thompson, can really get out and run. Even Mason Heinschel, the quarterback, can move. There's a lot of speed, a lot of running ability, a lot of playmaking ability in this class. And so Jalen Brown, even though he's a little bit bigger at 5'11", almost 200 pounds, he's still got good speed. He told me he ran a 10.7 100. I think somebody found online it was more around 10.8. Either way, that's moving at close to 200 pounds. And also read around a 4.4, 4.5 40. So, I mean, he's got good speed, good numbers that he put up last year at his high school. Let me I forgot what high school he went to. So let me open the page. Cardinal Newman High School in West Palm Beach. Rushed for almost 1,100 yards this year, 16 touchdowns, averaged more than 8 yards per carry, and also had a lot of offers. Louisville, he was committed to from June until November. When he backed off that commitment, said he didn't feel wanted there anymore. He also took an official visit to Georgia Tech. He had offers from Kentucky, Minnesota, NC State, West Virginia. I'm thinking there might have been a few more here. Let me look through. Boston College was on the list. Kentucky, Minnesota. Decent offer sheet. A good offer sheet for a Pitt prospect and a nice sort of late add to the class to put 3 running backs in the class. And that may seem like a lot, but I agree. It is a lot. The other sort of surprise signing was Cameron Sapp. He's a wide receiver at Miami Palmetto High School. He was committed to Florida Atlantic, and Pitt flipped him from FAU. At one point, he had offers from schools like Georgia Tech, Maryland, Nebraska, Syracuse, Texas A&M, Utah, West Virginia. Who knows how many of those offers were still committable by the end of the process, but at a certain point, he was coveted by those schools. He was committed to Florida Atlantic, like I say, and then flipped basically on signing day to the Panthers. This season, Sapp caught 44 passes for 600 yards. He averaged almost 14 yards per catch, had 8 touchdowns. He's a smaller guy. 5'9", 165, right around that same range that you see with the other receivers in Pitt's class, Tony Kinsler and Bryce Yates. And quite frankly, what you've seen as far as how this staff has prioritized wide receivers since they got here a year ago, bringing in Raphael Williams and Sincere Lee as transfers, and then going after these guys. I mean, Kinsler and Yates. You could throw in Demarion Folks, who was committed but flipped to Missouri earlier this week. You could throw in Khalil Sterling, who was committed, but Pitt ultimately opted not to sign Sterling. They're all smaller guys, and some might be listed at 5'11", some might be listed at 5'9". They're probably all right in that 5'8" to 5'10" range. Not a lot of size there. And it's debatable, and I think there's an interesting conversation on the message boards about this. It's debatable how important size really is. Would you rather have size or speed? Would you rather have size or good route running? Would you rather have size or good hands? And not necessarily that those are an either or, but if you're going to pick a guy who's just got size or a guy who's just got speed, chances are you might go with the speed, because that's a guy that if you can get the ball in his hands and give him an opportunity to get open or create a crease or some daylight, he can take off and make a big play. And so I think that's what this staff has gone for. And I think it's been the case ever since Cade Bell arrived as the offensive coordinator and the coaches that he brought in. Wide receivers coach J.J. Laster and running backs coach Lindsey Lamar in particular. I think they've been pretty comfortable taking smaller guys who can run, going for the speed element, the explosiveness, the playmaking. The guys who, like Desmond Reed. And Desmond Reed's small. And we all had our doubts about him, or at least I did, and I think a lot of you probably did too when you saw him in person. He's small. But he showed pretty much from the jump how good he can be if you can give him a little bit of space. Now, if he doesn't get a little bit of space, it's pretty hard to make big plays. But when he gets a little bit of space, he can really take off and go. And I think that's what they were going for in this recruiting class. So they came into signing day, as far as we knew, with Tony Kinsler and Bryce Yates at wide receiver, Saquon Smith and Ja'Carrion Turner at running back. And they added one more at each position. Jaylen Brown at wide receiver, Cameron Sapp at running back. I think it's interesting to bring in 3 running backs. I actually asked Lindsey Lamar yesterday, signing day, because they had a lot of the assistant coaches talk to the media. You can find all those videos right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And I asked Lindsey Lamar yesterday at signing day, is running back one of the easier positions to get on the field early? Is that one of the more, is that one of the positions that freshmen can maybe have the best chance of playing? Because I think we've seen that historically. We've seen a lot of freshmen have success and get on the field and play a lot at running back, more so than at offensive line or a lot of other positions, really, pretty much any other positions. And he said, yeah, sometimes, but in their offense, not so much, because there's a lot that the running backs are asked to do. They're not just taking, as he said, they're not just taking a handoff and running left. And that makes sense. And he pointed out how Desmond Reed is the only player in the country with 500 receiving yards and 500 rushing yards. There's a lot that they're being asked to do. There's a lot that's being put on the running back's plate in terms of responsibility. So it can be tougher for a freshman running back to get on the field in this offense, which I get. That makes sense. But I kind of feel like you don't sign 3 running back recruits unless you're thinking 1 or 2 of those guys are going to help you next year. That's just a lot of spots to be taken up by freshman running backs if you're not going to play them. And I've gone back and forth on whether they need a running back out of the transfer portal. We're going to talk about transfers in a second and guys who left and maybe how that opens up an opportunity for a running back in this class. And maybe Desmond Reed's ultimate decision will play a factor as well. But I think if you sign 3 freshman running backs, I think you're expecting to get some freshman contributions out of them, some first-year contributions out of those guys. And so what happened, whether Smith, Turner, or Brown get on the field this year, I'm not going to rule it out. I think a couple of those guys are enrolling early, so they'll be here in the spring, and they'll have an opportunity to learn the offense and get comfortable playing in it. So we'll see what they're able to do. And, wide receiver as well. I still think size is a good thing to have. Kenny Johnson's got decent size. Dejon Reynolds has decent size. I think bringing in a transfer with some size would be a good move, but it's not my money, right? And obviously the priorities are what we've talked about: offensive line, pass rusher. Got to get those guys. All right, so that was the additions to the recruiting class yesterday. They finished out at 21 recruits signed for Pitt. The day before, though, and we didn't talk about this yesterday because we were talking about signing day, but Pitt had 4 more players go into the transfer portal on Tuesday. 2 running backs, Rodney Hammond and Montrevious Lloyd, 1 wide receiver, Lamar Seymour, and then 1 defensive lineman, Elliot Donald. And if I just list over those names, there are some that jump out as eye-popping and very notable, for sure. And that list starts with Rodney Hammond. And Rodney Hammond's career will forever be a what-if at Pitt. What if he didn't get hurt in the season opener in 2022, which is an interesting what if because it has implications for Izzy Manikanda having a record-setting season and some record-setting performances. When you break Tony Dorsett's records, you've had a pretty impressive go of things. But who knows what opportunities Manikanda would have had if Rodney Hammond did not get hurt in that West Virginia game in 2022. Nevertheless, he was pretty remarkably underutilized when he was healthy and Abanikanda-less in 2023. We assume he was healthy, but he was pretty underutilized. Some curious personnel decisions. We didn't really understand why he didn't get used more. And then you fast forward to this year. Rodney Hammond's senior season at Pitt should be his crowning achievement. Working in tandem with Desmond Reed, playing in a new offense, it's going to be more explosive and more exciting, give him more opportunities to make plays, and he's ineligible for the first 4 games of the season. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. He was ineligible for the season. After 4 games, they managed to get his eligibility reinstated. He played sparingly over the next 4 games, had about 12 carries and 50 snaps or so in 4 games, and then requested a red shirt. And from the time Rodney Hammond requested a red shirt and asked not to play in the final 4 games because he never used his red shirt, so he could play in as many as 4 games this season, maintain his red shirt, and come back in 2025. From the time he requested the red shirt, I think everyone had that little voice in the back of your head saying, he's going to use that extra year of eligibility somewhere else. And I wanted to think it wasn't true. I wanted to think that after Pitt worked very hard, and I'm talking about the football program, worked very hard to get him reinstated so he could play in 2024, after considerable efforts were made to return his eligibility and give him an opportunity to play this season, I thought that he would stick with it. I thought that he wanted a red shirt so he could come back and have a full, final, satisfying year at Pitt. He talked a lot after last season about how he wanted to, he didn't want to leave with the 3-9, taste in his mouth. He wanted to prove they were better than that Pitt was better than that he was better than that, and that, he would have, he wanted to go out on a better note. Well, he didn't. I mean, Pitt went out on a better note. Pitt was 7-5 as opposed to 3-9, but Rodney Hammond was ineligible for 4 games. Through the efforts of the football program, was reinstated and then asked out after 4 games, which would have been, probably would have been pretty nice to have him in the season finale when at a certain point they were down to just 1 scholarship running back, and it was a freshman, Juelz Goff. Okay? Rodney Hammond was very much needed in the month of November. As Daniel Carter got lost to injury, Desmond Reed kept getting banged up, and then in the final game, they go into it with Derek Davis and Juelz Goff. Rodney Hammond is very much in that rotation if he's there. And same thing at Louisville. The game at Louisville, Rodney Hammond's on the field and playing, and maybe they're throwing to Rodney Hammond on a crossing route as opposed to Juelz Goff on that 4th down, where Goff runs his route short of the lead stick. Doesn't catch the pass anyway, but he was short of the lead stick regardless. Maybe Rodney Hammond runs that route a little bit better, or Desmond Reed could have been on the field. But that's another conversation altogether. But Rodney Hammond didn't want to play. Rodney Hammond wanted to take his red shirt. And so he didn't even travel to Louisville and Boston College. And when that was happening, I remember thinking and saying to people, boy, it would be a real something if he does this when they very much needed him, if he follows this path and then decides to transfer after all is said and done. And that's what Rodney Hammond decided to do. And so his career is left sort of unfulfilled. I think a lot of people are unsatisfied with his career. Probably feel like he could have achieved more. I'm sure he probably feels like he could have achieved more. Had some shining moments, Certainly his freshman year, he had some big carries in the fourth quarter against Clemson in 2021. But ultimately, kind of unsatisfying. And now Rodney Hammond's off to the transfer portal. Montrevious Lloyd, a redshirt freshman running back, also going to the transfer portal. I think he played a handful of snaps against Wofford last year. I don't think he got on the field at all this season. Lamar Seymour, a redshirt freshman wide receiver, also going to the transfer portal. He did not. I think he might have played one game this year. Caught one pass for 1 yard or something like that. Not a lot of production out of Lamar. I thought Lamar Seymour was going to be pretty good as a wide receiver. And I think he might have had an opportunity here, but he was just never in the mix and never seemed to get an opportunity. I mean, Tyreek Robinson seemed to pass him, in addition to Zion Fowler-El, who came in with the same recruiting class as Seymour. But I really thought Seymour was going to be, I thought the number one stud of that wide receiver recruiting class in 2023 was Kenny Johnson, but I thought Lamar Seymour was right behind him in Pitt's class. Well, we'll find out if he is or was, and he'll go elsewhere. Now, half of that class is gone. Half of that wide receiver recruiting class. Kenny Johnson's still here. Zion Fowler-El is still here. Lamar Seymour's gone, and Israel Polk left after last season. So he's gone. He went to Akron, actually. So that's it. And then Elliot Donald. And Elliot Donald, there have been, and there probably will continue to be, a lot of conversations about Elliot Donald, the hype, the potential, and what how he was viewed as a high school prospect and what his college career ultimately became. Now, as of this recording yesterday, Elliot Donald had not officially announced that he was entering the transfer portal, but Pitt had taken him off their official roster, and I've heard that he has entered the portal. And so we're including him on the list of guys who've gone to the portal. If he ends up announcing that he's retiring or something like that, we'll remove him from the list of guys going into the portal. But for now, we're considering him a player going to the portal. And Elliot Donald just never materialized. It just never came together for Elliot Donald for whatever reason. His career, and I think there's probably a lot of reasons, his career never really developed into the what he was heralded to be as a 4-star defensive line prospect out of Western PA. I think he played 100 defensive snaps the first 3 years of his career. This year he played 81 snaps, all in the first 5 games, and never really made an impact. Defensive end to defensive tackle. I think he was always going to be a defensive tackle, and it just never happened for him. And it's disappointing. It's unfortunate. And we'll have a bigger conversation at some point about that 2021 recruiting class as a whole and the defensive line recruiting class with Elliot Donald and Nakai Johnson and Dorian Ford, and how that all washed out of these top local guys, and none of them really panned out. But it's disappointing that Elliot Donald, for whatever reason, could never really crack through into the rotation or make a big impact. As with all these guys, you hope he goes somewhere and finds an opportunity to play and contribute, but it wasn't happening here. All right, and then the final thing, All-ACC teams announced on, what day was this? Tuesday? Yes, announced on Tuesday. Pitt had 5 players get recognized on the first, second, or third team. Desmond Reed and Kyle Lewis, both first-team selections. Reed was a first-team selection as an all-purpose back and as a return specialist. The all-purpose back makes sense. Like I said earlier, he's the only player in the country with 500 receiving yards and 500 rushing yards. Kyle Lewis was the top vote getter of any linebacker. Made the first team all-conference. He's the second Pitt linebacker to ever earn first-team All-ACC honors. The other one was Servassier Dennis in 2022. Kyle Lewis had the best stat line of any defensive player in the conference. I don't know if he's going to win ACC Defensive Player of the Year, but he should. Nobody else was as productive as he was across the board, and I would say that about most players in the country. There are very few who are as productive across the board as Kyle Lewis was. So we'll see what other honors come his way, but he's at least got a first-team All-ACC recognition under his belt. On the second team was Donovan McMillan as a second-team safety. He recorded 100-plus tackles for the second year in a row. First time a Pitt player has done that since 2007-2008 with Scott McKillop. And then Rasheem Biles and Ben Sauls both on the third team. And I think if there were any of these selections that irritated Pitt fans the most, it was Ben Sauls. Why was Ben Sauls not why was he not named to the first team? How could there be kickers that are better than him? And ultimately, when it comes down to it, Florida State had a kicker who went a perfect 13 of 13, and Miami had a kicker who only missed one. I think he was 25 of 26 or 26 of 27. Or no, it wasn't even that much. I forget what it was, but he only missed one kick. Ben Sauls missed 3. Now, granted, his misses were from 47, 45, and 59. The 45-yard miss, the shortest miss, was blocked. And he also made a 57-yard kick against Boston College. He made a 58-yard kick against Cal. I mean, he made a 57-yard kick against Syracuse. He made a bunch. He was 5 of 6 from 50 and out. In addition to being 6 of 6 from inside 40. Ben Sauls was really, really good. You tell me I could have my pick of kickers, I would pick Ben Sauls. But I understand why the voters in the ACC looked at the stats and said, well, we're going to pick the guys who have the best kicking percentage. And Florida State's kicker is a perfect, 13 of 13. It was pretty much their entire offense, as someone else said on the message board. So it's hard to argue with that. I understand it. I also think Ben Sauls is going to have a long, productive, lucrative NFL career as a kicker because I think he is that good. All right, I think that covered everything we wanted to talk about. The additions to the recruiting class, the latest additions to the transfer portal or departures to the transfer portal, and then the All-ACC recognition. Tomorrow we're going to talk a little Pitt basketball and anything else that comes up to wrap up the week. I can't believe we're almost to the end of the week, but sure enough, here we are. So thanks for tuning in today. I hope you enjoyed our signing day coverage yesterday and you've had a great week so far. Enjoy your Thursday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the week-ending edition of the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.